happens when we do the deep emptiness classes, you know? Ready, G? You can give it a zip? Sure. Thank you.
Sashi Buki Juchi Meto Tam Vira Vinci Ninde Kempani Sange Shindu Mite Uruwangi Dokun Nanda Shiva Druparsho Idam Guru Ratmandala Kaviratayami Sange Churam Saki Choknamba Janchu Badu Dagni Gyasuchi Daki Jine Gempe Sunyangi Joa Panchi Sange Druparshu Sange Churan Saki Choknamba Janchu Badu Dagni Gyasuchi Daki Jine Gempe Sunyangi Joa Panchi Sange Druparshu Sange Churan Saki Choknamba Janchu Badu Dagni Gyasuchi Daki Jine Gempe Sunyangi Joa Panchi Sange Druparshu.
Please sit comfortably with your spine straight for meditation. We'll shift our mind from activities and thoughts of the day to a neutral place. Breathing meditation. Be aware of the breath passing the nostrils for 14 rounds, beginning with exhalation. Inhalation is 1 round. Bring your awareness to your heart. Try to cultivate or get in touch with some very happy, positive feeling. See if you can feel uplifted and bright and positive without thinking about anything per se. In that space and from that place, get in touch with a holy being. Try to feel their presence or visualize them, whichever you feel closest to, whomever you feel closest to. And feel that intensify the emotion there. Joyous, uplifting, almost blissful feeling. And focus in a way to strengthen and intensify it, either by thinking more clearly or feeling the holy being more clearly. Expand that sensation and that awareness from your heart to fill your whole body, the space around you. I think this is me. This sensation, awareness, vibration, feeling. I'm this. It's difficult to see and feel this. You can concentrate on holy being glowing and light in your heart and feel their purity and holiness. You can focus the feeling there. You can think that my heart is this holy. And try to expand into your whole form, the space around you. Take a moment to strongly identify with the idea that this is me. This is who I am. Thank you. How much to all holy beings? Thank you for coming. A brief exercise in projection, labeling, and naming. Tonight we're speaking about emptiness, karma, how we conceive of things, how we label things, how we identify things. We talked last week about nature of reality. And so our ordinary way of being is to identify ourselves in this concrete, self-existent, narrowly defined human way, right? I'm John. I exist like this. This is who I am. This is all I am. This is what I am. Very limited and very specific and narrow in how we identify ourselves, right? So, I'd like to read you, when we start to talk about these philosophical things, it can become abstract and perhaps difficult to relate to. And it's one thing for us to say, okay, I'm an empty object and I'm labeled a certain way and conceived of a certain way, but that's just sort of psychological stuff, right? That's just sort of head stuff, right? That's just sort of playing mind games or something, right? Easy to sort of drift off into Never Land. You start talking about how we perceive and the nature of projection and the nature of reality and what's there, right? So I like to, whenever I see these things, I like to pull them out. So something I pulled out from a little article, it says, before you judge others or claim any absolute truth, consider that you can see less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum, and you can hear less than 1% of the acoustic spectrum. And as you read this, you're traveling at 220 kilometers per second across the galaxy. 90% of the cells in your body carry their own microbial DNA that are not you. The atoms in your body are 99.999, etc., empty space, and none of them are the ones you were born with. Human beings have 46 chromosomes, 2 less than a common potato. And the existence of a rainbow depends on the conical photoreceptors in your eyes. And animals without cones, for animals without cones, rainbows do not exist. So you don't just look at a rainbow, you create it. This is pretty amazing, especially considering that all the beautiful colors you see represent less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. So, when we start to talk about the nature of perception and the nature of reality, it's one thing to sort of have a high philosophical conversation using logic and deduction and reasoning to try to posit that we don't really exist the way we think we do, right? And that our perception is really not accurate, right? Or that our perception of ourselves as a human being that exists this way and this way only, and everything around us exists this way and this way only. And the way I perceive it with my senses and the way I experience it, in a normal, unexamined fashion, is hard and fast and true reality, right? That's our life. my ordinary experience and my ordinary perception and my ordinary relationship to that, my ordinary reaction to that, that's it, baby. That is life, and that is existence, and that is reality. Period. Okay? And I'm not interested in anything else. So, if we're going to live and examine life, if we're going to pay attention to our place in cosmos, or pay attention to how we exist in a more sophisticated fashion, or if we're really going to try to deeply penetrate into our place in the world, or our place in why are we here, and what's it mean, and what am I supposed to be doing, and where am I going, and how does it all, what's the point? If we're really trying to deal with those things and examine it, it behooves us to step back and look at the big picture, right? And that's what Buddhism is about. Buddhism is about stepping back and looking at the big picture and saying, this is one little slice of reality. This is one little level of reality. This is one type of reality, okay? And what we're experiencing as our existence, in our human realm, in our ordinary world, is not the big picture. It's a very narrow spectrum of existence. And if you really want to understand the big picture, and you really want to work at a higher level, exist at a higher level, then you have to step back and understand that and live congruently with that, right? And so from a Buddhist perspective, when we're talking about emptiness and ultimate reality, that's really what we're doing, right? What we're doing is saying, this is small potatoes, this life in this realm and this narrow dimension of perception and existence is small potatoes in the scheme of things, spiritually or ultimately, or from a high view, or an evolved view, or whatever you want to call it, right? And so let's look at this from this evolved high view of reality and understand it in that greater context and live it in that greater context, from that greater context, right? So, these are things we've talked about over the last couple of classes. Master Shantideva talking about compassion and seeing others as ourself, right? Why do we draw a distinction at the edge of our skin? Why do we see others as not us? How is it that their pain is not our pain, right? So we've already covered all that. I'm not going to rehash it, but I just pull up a few scientific things. So this is another piece that was done on the human brain. It says a study to the human brain, me is we. So they're talking about a scientific study that was done. So the human brain is wired, they're measuring the brain and how it behaves. And so they're saying the human brain is wired to connect with others so strongly that it experiences what others experience as if it's happening to us. This is at a neural basis. The study suggests that our brains don't differentiate between what happens to someone emotionally close to us and ourselves. Findings show that the brain's remarkable capacity to model self to others function in a way where people close to us become part of ourselves. And it's not just a metaphor or poetry, it's very real. We are wired to sync with others, and the more we sync, the less our brains acknowledge self-other distinctions. So, Master Shantideva 1,000 years ago, or 800 years ago, was saying, 750 years ago, was saying, this idea of self and other is something which we have conceptually created. It's something which we've trained ourselves to believe in. There is a perceptual basis for this. There is a way of living where we say, I got nothing to do with you, and I care about me, and I don't care about you, and I'm a discrete entity over here, and my mind and my body has got nothing to do with you, and is not relevant to me. And in fact, scientific studies are now showing that there are mirror neurons and the way the brain wires and the mind works, etc., very much indicates that the people around us are integral to our life and to our happiness and to how we experience emotion in the world, right? So not just dry philosophy and not just nice poetry, but in fact how the brain functions neurologically. Right? So I wanted to read a couple of lines from tonight's class's reading from Course 18, and we're in the last chapter of the guide. Well, we're in the emptiness chapter of the guide. And so Master Shantideva in the comments in the commentary on it is talking about empty things. And so Master Shantideva's root text says, "Consider this way all empty, working things. How could there be any gain or loss?" And this is just a brief excerpt. The commentary says, "Consider all the working things, empty as they are of any nature of their own. How could there be any gain that you would feel attracted to? How too could there ever be any loss that would make you feel angry? Neither one exists in the slightest. How could anyone ever do you any honor then, or any insult either? How could they ever help you or hurt you? What would there be to strive to get? What would there be to work to get rid of? How could there ever be anything with its own nature that made you happy or made you unhappy? Use logic to examine the true nature of things. None of the three elements in any situation has any nature of its own. When you crave something, where is the fact of craving? And who is it that's feeling the craving? And what is it that they feel craving for? Who is the relative that is helping so much? Who is the friend you feel so attracted to? None of them has the least nature of their own. Come to comprehend the real nature of things and make great efforts to neutralize worldly thoughts within you. When you look at all these beings, all those who are alive in the world, who is it then that dies here in the suffering existence? Death itself is nothing that has any nature of its own." So here in these verses on wisdom, Master Shantideva and the commentary written on his text is calling out the fact that death itself doesn't have any nature of its own. And so, we hear teachers say the point of the Buddhist path is to put an end to death, right? Is to practice in such a way where we can never suffer anymore and we don't have to die in this life. We can become an enlightened being in this lifetime. And people might think, yeah, that's marketing, or that's selling people the fountain of youth because it inspires them and motivates them and gets them to show up for church or whatever the case might be, right? But in fact, Master Shantideva is saying, when we're talking about emptiness and the nature of reality and the nature of perception, Master Shantideva is very clearly calling out the fact that every single thing that we want and chase after in the world, and every single thing that we don't want and we avoid in the world, doesn't have any nature of its own. It doesn't reside within the outer object. There is no nature to any outer object. Any good thing or any bad thing that we experience, the nature of being good or bad does not reside within that thing. We're supplying it. We're supplying its nature. We're supplying its identity. We're supplying the entire experience associated with that thing. And so Master Shantideva makes the point, why are we chasing around? Why are you running away? Why are we devoting our lives to things which don't even exist, really, in the way that we think they do, right? So tonight we're going to delve into that in a little bit more detail, a lot more detail. This is the class, the final class on the guide, and this is the point where Master Shantideva started flying off into the air when he was teaching the guide. He was flying, floating, levitating off into the air, and disappeared in the sky, and no one could figure out where he was. And then, something like a year later, they found him in South India, a resident there, and asked him to come back and teach. And he said, I left the monastery. I left the manuscript in the rafters of my room back at the monastery. And they went back and they found it, and that's how we got this book, and that's how this text was actually came to be. So the final section explains emptiness and explains how karma works in relation to emptiness. So this is something which is very elusive and very difficult to come by, which is fine. It's lovely that we talk about the fact that nothing has any nature of its own from its own side. We can talk about how things exist in dependence upon our projections or our labels or the terms and names that we give them. We can say that things exist in dependence upon how we conceive of them and how we talk about them and all these different things, right? So what? I'm going to walk down the street and saying, well, I won't think of them as beautiful, I'll think of them as ordinary. So what? How does that help us spiritually? I won't think of the yelling person as unpleasant. You know, how does that help me evolve spiritually? How does that help me have a better life? How does that help me to not suffer and be unhappy, right? And so this is where Master Shantideva really digs in and gets to it and says, you know, this is how it plays out, and this is how karma works in relationship to emptiness, and this is how karma interacts with emptiness so that you can change your life to be, you know, eternally happy in paradise forever, right? The last class that we did, we talked about Lord Maitreya's 6 steps, where we talked about if you don't understand emptiness, and if you don't understand where things come from, you create your own suffering, right? Remember Maitreya was talking about, remember last week? Hope you remember last week. You have seeds, bakchaks, from infinite past lives for ignorance, seeing things as self-existent, right? In this life, those seeds flower and assert themselves when you're born, and so we naturally see things as self-existent, and upon seeing something as self-existent, what happens? Yeah, you start to first, so the seeds flower, you see something as self-existent. I see a cake on the table as being self-existent, and shortly after that, the thought comes, the deliciousness and the goodness resides within the cake, and the cake is the source of the tasty, delectable experience that I could have. And then what comes after that? You crave. Then you want it, and then you put yourself first and don't care about other people, and, you know, steal it or take it and don't care if anyone else gets it, or engage in whatever, you know, potentially negative behavior one might, because you want to take the self-existent, tasty, delectable goodness from over there and bring it over here and put it into me, right? So that I can have happiness, right? And then as a result, what happens?
You create more seeds.
You collect karma. You collect negative karma to perpetuate not having tasty, delectable things in your life because you took them away from other people, perhaps, whatever the specific seed might be, right? So we talked about that last time. And Maitreya explained why if you don't understand emptiness, you'll collect karma, right? And if you don't understand the emptiness of things, if we don't understand how we see things as self-existent, then we will continue to collect negative seeds, negative karma, negative energies, which will perpetuate our suffering existence, right? So, in this class, he explains how karma works, right? I mean, the basic idea of karma that one initially learns when one hears about it in the Buddhist class or the newspaper, or whatever, is, you know, if you kill someone, you know, your life will be shortened or something bad will happen to you, whatever the case might be, right? If you steal from someone, you'll have a lack, or someone will steal from you, right? So Arya Nagarjuna says, don't forget the time lag, right? The time lag is the important thing. It's the deadly part of karma, right? If it were the case that every time I deceive someone to get money or to trick them or to try to advantage myself financially, if it were the case that every time I trick someone to get money, my bank account immediately dropped in its balance, you know, $1,000 debited from my bank account every time, you know, I'd stop the behavior pretty quickly. If every time I stepped on a bug or swatted a mosquito and my arm broke, you know, or my ribs cracked, everyone would be perfectly ethical and moral, right? I mean, the moment you yelled at someone, you know, you heard screaming in your ears, you know, and felt horrible, right? You never do it, right? So, unfortunately, that's not how karma works, and therefore, it's not easy, and the world is not ethical and moral. So, sadly, why do people behave the way they do ethically? Your parents, you know, so a teacher somewhere along the way, you know, catechism class, whatever you did when you were a little kid, you know, someone said to you, this is good behavior, this is bad behavior, you know, follow the 10 commandments or you'll go to hell, you know, this is the law, and if you break the law, you'll get arrested. It doesn't matter, you know, someone who you believed or respected and listened to told you how to behave, right? Told us how to behave. be ethical. This is what being ethical is. This is how you should live, and this is how you shouldn't live, right? Standard stuff, right? So that's one reason why people live ethical lives, or Buddhist, or follow Dharma, or whatever the case might be, right? The other reason is because there's some reasoning and logic and understanding involved. Someone has explained it, someone has provided an intellectual basis, someone has provided a logical reason to behave a certain way. If you do this, this is how it will help you, this is how it will hurt you. If you don't do this, this is how it will help you, this is how it will hurt you. Let me explain the reasoning so that you can work it out yourself and decide what you want to do, right? So it's either sort of a logical-based ethical behavior, or a faith-based, or a cultural-based ethical behavior, right? This is kind of the two options, right? And, frankly, people who have this, the people whose ethical system is based upon cultural mores, or parents saying, Billy, don't do that when they're 5 years old, their ethics are not deeply rooted. And so they're easily swayed and easily don't behave ethically. And so, whereas if one has a logical, rational understanding for ethical behavior, hopefully they'll use it. This presupposes that we can call it to mind and memory, right? For a logical, ethical, rational training to be of any use, you have to be conscious of it, you have to think about it, right? So we're going to talk about how karma works, so that hopefully we are logically, rationally trained and behave ethically as a result, rather than just saying, the Dalai Lama said so, or Jason Kappa said so, or the Buddha said so, or whatever the case might be, right? To be good Buddhists and to be good practitioners of ethics and morality, you've got to understand it, you've got to believe it, you've got to buy it, right? So, when we start to get it, this chapter gets a little more difficult. So when we start to get into these things, we can do in various analyses of emptiness, and how things exist and how they don't exist, and why it matters and why it doesn't, right? And if you take, you take a cup of tea or a pen or whatever else, and you can, I don't have a pen, but you can visualize a pen, right? Do the pen thing, right? When you start to analyze emptiness, you can say, all right, where is the pen? Where does it exist, right? Pen is a collection of parts. It's got an ink, it's got a spring, it's got a top, it's got, the plastic bits. Is the pen, is the identity of the pen, is the nature of the pen, is the penness and the very existence of the pen, does it reside in one of the parts? No, because if you took the spring out, you still have a pen, right? Etc., etc. Does the pen exist? Does the penness exist in none of the parts? Well, no, because if you didn't have any parts of a pen, clearly you wouldn't have a pen there. You couldn't write with something that didn't have ink or a spring or plastic or anything else, right? So, does the pen exist in the collection of all the parts together? Maybe yes, maybe no. If you got pen and spring and ink and a roller tip and put it all together in the right way, do you have a pen? Yeah. You can write with it. Well, the text says no. Okay. Why? Because if it were a pen, if you took the collection of the parts, I want to use my teacup, and I'll stick with it. If you took the, because I don't have something in my hand, if you took the collection of the parts, oh, thank you, I just have to hold something in my hand to wave it around. All right, it's a pencil. Can we shift gears?
Close enough?
Close enough. All right, we'll call it the pencil. So, if you took all those things and you put them together, right, would it always function for that as that? Would it always be that for every sentient being that met it and encountered it? If a fly came in and landed on it, it's not a pen. You can't write with it. If an ant is walking across it, it's not a pen. You can't conceive of it that way. You can't relate to it that way. You can't think of it that way. You can't use it that way. It doesn't function that way. If the nature, identity, or penness is in this thing, it has to be that for everything. It's not possible for this to be a pen from its own side, self-existently, unless it's that all the time. It can't be a pen some of the time and not a pen some of the time. It can't be a pen for some and not a pen for others. In this case, pencil, right? Because if it's a pen for some and not a pen for others, then it's not a pen from its own side. It's very straightforward, right? And so, it's like National Geographic did an article, I don't know, it's like 6 months ago or something. It was on the cover, and they about the human body, right? And they did a study of the human. Scientists did a study of the human body, and they said, well, if you want to talk about the human body as a collection of cells, cells and bacteria and viruses and everything else, it's actually trillions of times more foreign cells in this thing than there are human things in this thing. So if you actually even talk about a human body and call it a human body, it's mostly not human. It's mostly not what we would consider human, So we walk around saying, well, this is a human body. It's got, it's got blood, and it's got tissue, and it's got cells and organs and blah, 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 blah. And it's a human body. Well, guess what? We're calling it a human body. We're labeling it that. We're naming it that. It is that for us. But someone else, a scientist in a lab coat over there, is saying, hello, I got news. I just added it all up, and you're 98% not human. I'm not going to call you human. So that's just what it is. That's just the nature of things. That's the nature of how things exist, right? Things don't exist as anything until there's a bunch of stuff there that someone defines and names and calls it something. Whether it's this, or the room, or the realm, anything in existence functions that way, right? So, thank you.
But for convention's sake, we still call it a pen.
And does it function as a pen?
Yes.
Yes. And we call it a pen. And everyone who speaks English
Calls it a pen.
understands what we mean when we say it's a pen.
Yeah.
If we say it's a pen and they don't speak English, then they have a problem. But that's a different issue, and it's along the same parallel lines, right?
Yeah.
You can call it a pen, but that doesn't help someone who's, speaks Swahili. Say, where's the pen? And you're like, whoa, whoa. But we have to go down through the layers, and so we'll get to that. You want to go to the advanced topics right away? Fair enough. We'll move forward. All right. So why does my mind think I'm a human when National Geographic says I'm, got trillions of other things which aren't human going on right here? Something is causing me to say I'm a human and think of myself as a human, rather than to think of myself as mostly as a host to foreign organisms. Like, why don't I walk around saying this is a host to foreign organisms that are mostly not me? Why don't I walk around thinking like that? Why don't I have that name for myself? Right? Why don't I have that identity for myself? Why? Why does my mind say I'm human, that's what's here, end of story, and it's all good and that's all it is, and don't bother me? I mean, my mind is functioning this way for a reason. My mind is identifying this stuff and this data this way for a reason. My mind is tuning out all this other stuff and oblivious to it for a reason, right? I mean, it's not part of my reality for a reason, right? And I read the National Geographic article and I understood it, but I still haven't thought about it for the last 6 months until just now, Even though I know it's my valid reality, because science tells me that I'm mostly a host to other stuff.
Well, we call you John, we don't call you slightly foreign object.
Host to other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. But why? Why?
For convention purposes?
Why does the very thought arise? You see,
Oh, right.
why do thoughts pop into our head? I mean, I am not the puppet master. There is not a puppet master back here somewhere going, think this thought next. Okay? Have a miserable thought. Have a happy thought. Right? It's just not our reality, our perception, right? So something is going on. Something is happening where stuff just popping into my head all day long. Where's it coming from? Why is this particular stuff popping into my head all day long? Why is it different stuff popping into my head all day long? Why do I have this stream of thoughts all day long? What the hell is it, and where the hell does it come from? Why do I react that way to a circumstance instead of a different way to a circumstance? Why does that behavior make me angry instead of making me happy? And on and on and on ad infinitum, right? So, Master Shanti Deva says, and the text says, your karmic seeds, right? There is stuff there. There is a basis of perception. There is something that is perceived. Then thoughts come up. Conceptions, identification, ideas, names, terms, labels, feelings. And all this stuff is going on, right? And that's us. That's my mind. That's my body. That's my experience. That's my life. Why that content? Why those thoughts? Why those reactions? Why those experiences? Could have been anything, right? So the point is that's karmic. Those are karmic ripeness. From a Buddhist perspective, the stuff that's behind or that flowers and results in a thought or a feeling or an idea or an understanding are karmic seeds ripening, are karmic impulses going off, right? So every thought I have has karmic impulses behind it. Every emotion I have has karmic impulses behind it. Every concept I have has karmic seeds flowering behind it. Every single thing that I experience on every level has karmic seeds, energetic impulses, ripenings behind it. Okay? So from a Buddhist perspective, there's a perceptual field. There's data. There's information. There's stuff. Right? Anything could be anything. And what it is to us is a function of our karmic ripenings, our perceptions, the way in which we cognize, the way in which we think, the way in which we feel, the way in which we identify and name and label bits, right, and stuff, right? So my mind makes me see this as a teacup, not as, a glowing, vessel of effervescent, ambrosia, whatever it might be, right? So why? I configured that perception sometime in the past. From a Buddhist perspective, we are a collection of karmic seeds, right? And the ripenings of those karmic seeds, right? Karmic seed is 64 karmic seeds collected per instant, 65 karmic seeds collected per instant, right? Every thought, every fluctuation of the mind, every thought, every word, every action is collecting vast numbers of karmas. Meaning residual energetic impulses, residual energies, right? Which I collect, which are me, right? Countless trillions of those are latent and not yet bringing a result, right? They are potencies waiting to bring a result, potentials waiting to bring a result, unripened seeds waiting to flower and sprout, right? Those seeds which are ripening, flowering, sprouting, use whatever metaphor you want, those seeds which are the energetic impulses which are arising, those karmic seeds, i.e. energetic impulses which are arising, are the things which drive our mind, which form our mind, which cause our mental perception, process, perception, functioning, identification, and all the rest. So, every thought that I had in the past is going to bring its result, right? Eventually. And we talked about it last week. What I think and say and do right now is me configuring my future mind state. I'm configuring my future mind state right now in every present moment, right? Every thought, every speech, every undertaking that I engage in right now is establishing my future mind state, is setting up and preparing and laying the foundation for my future mind state, my future perceptual ability, my future capacity to experience reality. Setting up the very nature of the realm that I'll experience in the future, the very nature of the being that I'll be in the future. Why? Because my mind will function in a particular way to perceive particular things and not perceive other things. Just like right now we're perceiving 1% of our, audio and visual spectrum with science measures. That's all, and that's what science measures. I mean, how's that for a gag? We're experiencing 1% of the spectrum that science can measure. What about the spectrum they can't measure? It's like 1% of a small spectrum of a big spectrum. Anyway, we won't go there. It's an interesting thought. So, okay. So this is profound. This is how you get to paradise. This is how you become enlightened in one lifetime. There is no set state. There is no baseline reality. There is no self-existent human realm. There is no self-existent any realm. Okay? A being, a sentient being, experiences whatever reality they have the capacity to experience. Period. If my mind, is it possible that a mind could just be having a series of happy thoughts going one after the other, after the other, after the other? Yeah, you meet miserable people in this life and you meet happy people in this life, just in an ordinary sense. I mean, you say, God, why are they such a lousy human being? They're just miserable and unhappy all the time. It's not because they choose it. It's not because they're like, I want to be a miserable human being and I'm going to think lousy, miserable thoughts all day long. Their mind is functioning that way. They don't have a choice. They can't just say, today I'm going to flip the switch and be a good human being, a happy and a positive human being. Impossible. Doesn't happen. Right? They do not have the capacity. They do not have a mind that functions that way. They do not have impulses arising. They do not have seeds flowering that cause a mind to function in that way, and therefore it is not their reality. And on the opposite side of that coin is yeah, there are people that are walking around happily, thinking happy, joyous thoughts all day long, and we bump into them, not often enough, right? And by extension, it's not a big stretch to say, of course one can have a mind. Of course one can establish a mind, create a mind, have a mind which is configured in a way which is really happy all the time, supremely happy all the time, forever. How? It's in the present moment, we are collecting the cause for that to occur. Meaning, we are collecting the karmic seeds, energetic potential, latencies, residues, which are virtuous and good and positive. And doesn't it just make sense that if we're carrying around virtuous and good and positive energy in a very subtle way, on a very subtle level, all day long, all the time, it would manifest on coarser levels and grosser levels and more base levels? Absolutely, right? Absolutely, not a big stretch, right? And so that's how you get to enlightenment in one lifetime. That's how you achieve tantric paradise. You collect the causes to see pure, holy, virtuous beings. Is it because they're there and you can't see them? I ask you. Are there holy beings right here, right now, that you can't see?
Okay.
Maybe. Good answer. For who? Right?
Okay.
We don't know. I am not seeing them. Could somebody else be seeing them? Absolutely. Right? They're not just self-existently there behind the magic curtain and we can't happen to see it. It's not like that. Right? It's not like that. It's not like there's a self-existent curtain and a self-existent holy being and we're on the wrong side of the curtain. And if we could just somehow pull the curtain aside, like, or get the magic pixie dust sprinkled on us, that we'd be able to see them and our eyes would like all of a sudden change. It's not like that. Right? The very reality we perceive is a function of our perceptual capacity. Duh. Right? Doesn't it make sense that those with a very limited perceptual capacity don't perceive much. And those with a very vast perceptual capacity perceive a lot. Yeah. Where it's a stretch for us is it possible to have a perceptual capacity beyond the normal human capacity of our eyes and our ears and our skin and nose and tongue?
Leap of faith, but it's possible.
No, it's not even a big thing. Science tells us that. I mean, science says you can't see 98% of the visual spectrum that we measure. Your eyeballs are like only that good. You can't hear most of the sounds that we can measure. Your ears are only that good. I mean, science is telling us, look guys, you as an organism suck. You know? You as a human organism, it's a crappy organism. You can't even perceive the stuff that we're measuring all around you. You know? You're getting like an infinitesimal amount of the stuff that we know is there for a fact.
In fact, we've made it this far as a miracle.
Right? So, you know, I mean, if science is saying, dudes, you only got 1% of what we know about, and I guarantee you and confirm it for you, right? Is it a big stretch to say there's more we can't see? No. Not really, right? So, yeah.
So, John, I mean, it really helps me to hear you, like, you know, going on and on, like all these different
Rambling
ways.
on about this. A tirade like that.
You know, but how we're forced to see things. I know in other classes sometimes they ask you for examples, like even if it's the simplest of example.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm sitting here like translating this to like what happened in my life.
Yeah.
To you know today, but I'm just can you just like bring it home to a simple example? For instance, if we got in a fight with our husbands today, like, which is what happened to me before I came to class, like I was like forced to you know see it in a particular way.
So you know, Chris started to address it, and we have to get into it. But so when we talk about how things exist and the fact that things exist, right? The fact that something came into existence for us, the fact that our reality manifests and configured in a certain way, right, is also driven by karma, right? So we have to go down through the layers, but there are multiple things going on. Your husband walked in the door. He had a certain mood. He said something, you said something, etc., etc. You know? You reacted the way you reacted. Every single instance of that, on every level, is driven by karma. Meaning, there is data there. There is stuff there. Why did your husband walk through that door instead of a lovely person that you couldn't wait to see who said sweet things to you? Why did that guy instead of that girl walk through that door? Why did the stuff that's there configure and manifest as your reality in that way at that moment in time, right? Why was your mind functioning that way at that moment in time, right? Why was your body and your mind in the state that it was in at that moment in time? Why was it in a different state? Why didn't you have a happy body, a rested body, a happy, refreshed mind that didn't care if anybody said anything to you? You wouldn't affect your happiness and your good mood, right? And you could just feel like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. You know, I understand you're really upset. And, yeah, it's a shame that you're really angry and you're really hurt and you're really, needing to yell and I'm sorry to see all that. And what can I do to help you feel better? Why wasn't the mind configured like that? Why didn't the mind react like that? Right? So it's everything from the emotional response, the thoughts associated with the event, you and the thing outside you. It's the three, in Buddhism, what's called the three spheres, which, all of reality is subsumed within the three spheres. The three spheres are you, what's outside of you, and the interaction between the two, basically. Subject-object interaction. Agent, creation. When you purify the three spheres, you have purified all of reality. When you have a pure view of the three spheres, you have a pure view of all of reality. So, we have to have correct understanding of emptiness as it relates to me, or you in this case, what's around you, and how you interact with those things.
That's a definition of pure view, is a complete, thorough understanding of emptiness.
Yeah. I mean, at a sutra level, yeah.
Okay.
So,
In Tantra, there's a line that says, try to remove the belief in things that function and view things as pure. And they're talking about it in terms of emptiness.
yeah, so it's one of the, when you talk about how you describe emptiness and how you define emptiness, there are different schools in ancient India.
Right.
And so one school says that things exist in dependence upon their parts.
Right.
Things are empty of self-existence.
Middle.
Things exist in dependence upon causes, right? That's right. Nothing exists empty of being in the absence of causes. And then there's another school that talks about things exist upon functioning. There's another view that says functioning things exist. There's a certain, there's a certain view in ancient India that said if a thing functions, then it must truly exist from its own side, because it can't function from its own side unless there's something really there from its own side.
And what existed on it.
Yeah, so this is another emptiness perspective. Yeah.
But I'm just trying to distinguish the when they say pure, it's related to emptiness.
Pure view, yeah, yeah.
That's all.
Sutra. You know, from a higher teachings perspective, pure view. Right. So the meditation we did, you came in late. The meditation we did at the beginning of class, right, was around pure view. How do I define myself? How do I see myself? How do I relate to myself? What is my view of myself, and what is my view of the world around me? Okay. So, and from a higher perspective, one would say blank canvas. Everything is empty. Raw data, cosmic soup, fundamental substrate for me to perceive and project onto, according to the nature of my mind, the karmic seeds ripening in my mind stream, and the thoughts and conceptualizations and images and identities that arise as valid perceptions in my mind. Because that's how my mind is functioning, and that is my world and my reality. So pure view from a higher teaching perspective refers to that. I understand that everything is blank canvas, and if I have pure view, I'm seeing everything as fully. I'm not, so it's about the positive projection. So in
In a proactive sense.
in a proactive sense. So from a sutra perspective, you're saying everything's empty. I'm going to collect virtue. I am not going to yell when someone yells. I'm not going to yell back when someone yells at me. You know, I understand that the fact that my husband was pissed off when he walked in the door and he popped off and said something to me that really hurt my feelings came from me yelling in the past. And I'm not going to yell, and I'm going to say something nice to him, and I'm going to have some virtuous reaction so that I break the cycle of suffering, of the vicious circle of collecting negative karma. You know, by having wisdom in that moment, by understanding where he came from, by understanding the nature of reality, emptiness, ultimate reality, all those things. It's like, nope, not going to be negative. Not going to collect negative karma. Not going to create multiple yelling people in my future reality. I am not going to set my mind up. I am not going to configure my subtle energetic system. I am not going to configure all the latent energies in my mind stream in such a way where I'm going to experience screaming people in the future. I am not going to configure my very existence, my very mental existence, my very perceptual existence in a way where yelling beings even arise in my reality. Like, I'm going to set up the energetic basis, the karmic seed basis, the subtle mental basis, to not even have the perceptual capacity to perceive, to observe, to have a yelling being in my realm. Like, they can't even exist. I don't even have the perceptual faculty to experience yelling. There's like no mental function that acknowledges yelling or unpleasantness associated with whatever that may be. You see?
Yeah. Awesome.
It's like that. What if you had a mind right now that just didn't compute? It's like somebody spoke Swahili to you. It just doesn't compute. It means nothing. What if you had a mind that behave that way when someone was shitty to you. It just doesn't compute. It's irrelevant. It's absolutely meaningless. You're just like, hi, nice to see you. I'm John. I didn't get that. Can you rephrase that? No.
That's why you leave.
Yeah, right. That's like, I mean, that's what we're talking about. You see, in a practical sense, our goal, right, in understanding karma and emptiness is to say, I want to create a mind which does not, at its very functional level, at its base, subtle functional level, doesn't even have the capacity to observe or perceive or experience anything unpleasant, right? So when you get into the higher teachings and the more advanced teachings, it's like, you're an advanced yogi, advanced meditator, advanced tantric practitioner. Oh yeah, somebody stabbed him with a knife. Didn't matter. It's just like some light shone through the hole. It's just a complete other reality. And so this is the key to paradise. This is the key to enlightenment, right? Because if you understand this, and if you do this, you clean your mind, you purify your mind, you create a mind which can only function in a certain way. You create a mind which can only function to experience bliss, highest bliss, right?
How do you eliminate the seeds of afflictions then?
So it's an evolutionary process, right? So it's the upward spiral, right? Every time you break that cycle of not yelling back, in the sutra sense, you have eliminated seeds, right? And every time you're virtuous and loving and kind and compassionate, you have collected the appropriate seeds to have a great mind that perceives great things, right? From a higher perspective, from a higher view, the more one has pure view, right? The more one is seeing the blank canvas as a pure world, moment to moment, day to day, the faster one is collecting that karma for it to ripen into a valid perception. So that's why a sutra path is, 3 countless eons, and the tantric path is potentially 1 lifetime. Because if you go around from a sutra perspective, if you go around saying, okay, I'm going to not react, I'm going to when a negative karma ripens into some kind of suffering for me, I'm going to just stay neutral, or I'll be virtuous in some way, right? Turn the other cheek, or say something nice, or be loving, or be compassionate. You have countless seeds to do that with. And we're not collecting very powerful virtuous karmic seeds to ripen into a result, right? So to accelerate that practice, that's what the highest teachings of Buddhism are about. That's what the tantric teachings of Buddhism are about. They're about how do you collect the most powerful, effective karmic seeds that will ripen as quickly as possible into the result of a mind which perceives holy things all the time. That's tantric path.
Before you go on, John.
Yeah.
What about purification, purifying negative
That's good too.
seeds?
Yeah.
Is that also
No, that's very
effective or
that's
useful at this
Sure.
point?
We're carrying however many countless negative karmic seeds, energetic impulses, and however many positive, right? And it's the scales of justice, which outweighs the other. More negative, more positive seeds and, karmas. Yeah, you want to get rid of the negative ones through whatever means possible. Better to not have them ripen and get rid of them than to have them ripen and suffering and get rid of them. It's like, would you rather have, an injury to ripen every karmic seed, or would you rather just get rid of it through some other virtuous practice, right? Absolutely preferable to do the latter.
Which comes first in terms of chicken and egg? Is it, purification or removal of all negative karmic seeds leads to emptiness, or emptiness leads to automatically, once you perceive emptiness, you cannot have negative karmic seeds anymore?
No, it's neither. So, the path of seeing is sort of, is followed by the path of habituation, right? After you perceive emptiness and ultimate reality, emptiness/ultimate reality, you have a valid basis. You have had an experience. You've perceived reality in a way where you know how it works and you know what the truth of the matter is. Based upon that, you stop being a schmuck, right? So,
What the truth of the matter is. Just stick your hand.
So it's like if you got kids, for example. I have kids. I know I'm not supposed to scream at my kids. Do I scream at my kids? Sometimes. Do I lose my patience and get angry with my kids? Sometimes. But I know I'm not supposed to. And the more I know I'm not supposed to, the better I behave. So it's like that. You know, you see emptiness, you experience ultimate reality, right? It's like, I know I'm not supposed to do anything negative. I know I'm just like shooting myself in the foot. Sometimes you just can't help yourself. Right? I mean, we do it plenty in our lives, right? I know I shouldn't do this, but I really can't help myself, right?
And you really deserve it.
So, the point being that once you experience emptiness and perceive ultimate reality, you'll never do anything really bad. You'll never collect any really huge negative karma, right? So it takes however many lifetimes to stop doing all of it. And that's the fourth path, the path of habituation. Where you're like, I experienced ultimate reality, I know what I'm supposed to do, I'm retraining myself to behave the way I'm supposed to retrain, I still can't control myself sometimes, and I have bad habits, but I'm not going to step too far out of line. I like that.
Awesome.
Right. You know, and I slip into the self-existent view myself. It's like, should I move to another city? You know, should I get another job? You know, should I change relationships? Should I never see my kids again? You know. And it's like this natural human tendency to think, if I just change all this stuff out there, I can be happy. And it doesn't work. It just never works, you know? And that's the self-existent thinking, that it doesn't matter what you change externally. It doesn't matter what you do externally. This stuff doesn't exist out there from its own side. It's only what we're doing internally. We have to change the very nature of our perception and the very nature of the thoughts that pop into our head. I got to get different thoughts to pop into my head themselves. I need to get happy thoughts to pop into my head automatically. I need to get, you know, everything, I want a constant stream of the thoughts that I want popping into my head. That's being virtuous, you know, that's engaging in goodness, you know.
But where's the balance of understanding that you might have, understanding one's capacity and also one's karma with certain situations that you'd be in, where it's just like you don't have the virtue to be able to handle a certain situation. You just don't. Like you'd love to, but you don't. And is it better to refrain in order to while practicing, not to avoid, but to really be able to build one's practice to then re-encounter certain situations so that you can employ your practice rather than just, you know, trying every time and then, you know, shooting yourself in the foot and screwing up more.
Yeah.
Like, how does that calculate? You know, because it's one thing where it's like, I know this is my practice, I know this is what I'm supposed to do, and I try it again, and then like, damn, you know,
I just feel like a failure and a loser.
well,
and
not just that, but like
person.
karmically, you know, as one practices, you know, right, how much damage you've done, and then to reverse that, it's like, now I'm doing the 4 powers, like every, you know, it's like an hourly thing, you know. You know, realistically, how does that work with our practice? What would
Just a quick note, I work on the trading floor and I hear frequently people say, you only have so much good karma.
that you run out?
Right.
Interesting, huh? Karma has made it to the exchange.
Yeah.
Just the mercantile exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's assuming that's luck. I mean, that's not, you know, but.
Yeah, so to answer your question, so very important point. You have to work at your own edge. And everyone has their personal path, right? Teachers, lineage can provide frame of reference, information, instructions, guidance, you know, toolkit,
Vows.
all of those things. Many multitudinous tools at your disposal. And every moment, day to day, it's our individual life, right? to say, how am I going to do this, and how am I going to engage, and what am I going to try, and what am I not going to try, and I need to pull back here, I need to push forward there, right? I mean, I spent years doing Dharma projects. You know, I was like, oh, I'll run the Dharma Center. You know, oh, I'll run ACI classes in New York for Yossi Michael. Like, I'm going to spend years like collecting miserable negative karma doing Dharma projects. You know, it's just like I had such a bad attitude. You know, it's like I probably, God knows how much negative karma I collected, like doing virtue, right? Right? So, you know, we're all unique, and once you have the tools and once you have the frame of reference, it's your call, you know. And obviously, good to have someone to talk to, and good to have someone to bounce ideas off of, and spiritual friends and all the rest to say, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm working with, and what do you think? Should I try this approach? Should I try that approach? What's skillful means? What's a good technique? There's no formula, you know. I mean, there is the long run. There are the three principal paths, right? It is karma and emptiness. This is all of our frameworks to live with. And, you know, when you or I are in our personal unique situation of dealing with this one issue, what's the right approach? You might have to try 10 approaches to find the right one. It's life, you know? I mean, hopefully we can get it right the first time. There's verses that I read earlier saying, you know, where is the friend? Where is the enemy? You can't even find these things, you know? Who is it that's dying? It doesn't even exist. So the bedrock is understanding emptiness, you know? The bedrock antidote, the foundational antidote is understanding emptiness, you know? Now, you know, I could say to you, gee, next time somebody I'll find the right example.
There's so many. Just
I want to be careful here, okay?
So many. Just pick one.
Next time someone says, I don't like your shoes, gee, you've got really ugly fashion. And that like really pains you deeply every time.
Deeply.
Right?
Yeah.
You can say, oh my God, I understand where they're coming from, right? I understand that I can't say anything to them, or I'll have more of these people in my life in the future, and my reality will suck in the future, you know, my perceptions will be miserable in the future, right? It still sucks. It's still painful. Still unpleasant, right? And you say, oh my God, I'm going to go home and like crying for 3 days. I mean, obviously it's not proportional to the comment, but you get the idea. You know, I'm going to go home and cry for 3 days, and I'm going to be depressed for a month because that happened. Okay, those karmas were collected in the past. Karmic seeds were collected, and they brought their result. It was a very painful experience, right? And that is your valid current reality. You did not collect the seeds to experience it in the future. That is how it works, right? It is painful and it is unpleasant to experience negative karmas we collected in the past. There's no way around it. What's the solution? What's the antidote? Pure view is the highest antidote. You know? I find that whenever something is really miserable in my life, to the extent that I'm able to see it with a different worldview, like really, like I feel like really depressed and really unhappy, and I'm trying to generate thoughts that, you know, all the other depressed, unhappy people in the world aren't going to suffer from this, and, you know, do Tonglen or whatever, right? You know, I feel really depressed and I feel really unhappy, and I'm going to, you know, do my best to think about everyone around me as being a holy being, you know, who's here for me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So, for me personally, I find that really exerting whatever level of effort I can around correct view when I'm suffering is a very powerful antidote to short circuit that karma, to limit the suffering, to to reduce it and speed it up and to clean it and to put an end to it more quickly. If that makes sense. So karmic seed ripens, it has a duration, it has an intensity, you know? Can you shorten the duration? Can you reduce the intensity? That's my personal approach. But, you know, karma collected and karma ripened is what it is, regardless, you know, however unpleasant that is. And what then, you know, the follow-on is what is my capacity to think and behave right now for my personal future benefit? And you know, don't go into a situation setting yourself up to fail. That's just, you know, I mean, it's common sense in a way. It's not like I'm going to be the heroic karma dharma practitioner. I'm going to go into the most miserable, hard situation that anyone's ever encountered, and I'm going to just practice being virtuous. And then you get blown up, and you know, you can't do anything for a month. Why? Why do that? Because it was forced on you by your past karma.
Right.
Because the thought popped into your head for no goddamn reason. Not.
But then there's also just the avoidance of it. Like I think about when I was living in Boulder and how incredibly polite everyone is, and you actually think you're being very virtuous all day because you're in this place where everyone's so polite, and it's.
Were they just stoned?
Probably. I mean, you know, but it's like, but there was something interesting about one's practice because you're not being tested, and so you actually are, you know, conditioned to thinking you're, you know, living a quite virtuous life, when I don't think that's in case true. And so I wonder when there are situations where you have, you know, people you work with or people you're associated with, for instance, you know, there's times where I just think, just pluck them out like bad weeds and don't have them involved in the garden, and it'll be great, and you'll have a wonder, you know. But then at the same
if they had that nature from their own side.
Right. See, that's the thing, right? Sucks.
If it resided within them, that would be fine.
Right.
But karmically, completely ineffective.
I just heard a teaching from one of the ACIs from ACI 11, and how to, you know, treasure the pains and the asses that come into our life, because as we practice they become less frequent.
They're harder to come by, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's simply as you clean your karma, there are fewer and fewer negative seeds ripening into nasty people, right?
That's true.
And in the meditation retreat, Udasa was saying that you could use the sneeze in your coughing person to keep you from slipping into cell illness. Not that your life.
Well, that's really good. That'd be helpful, actually.
You know, a person will keep you on your game.
That's awesome. Okay.
You know, for me, just for me personally in my life, it's worked out that I have internalized the Buddhist teachings, you know, to really just simple position, which is it's all about how I position internally with everything. You know, it doesn't matter what happens, better for good, bad, or indifferent. All that matters is how I position internally. You know, I've got a lot of money, and I make $250,000 a year. Great. I make, you know, lousy small salary. You know, there's financial stress and financial difficulty and financial problems. And how do I position with that? You know, how do I position with making $3 million a year? How do I position with barely making 6 figures a year? You know, what's my inner landscape? Am I generous in both cases? Am I oblivious? What am I doing? You know, I have people in my life who are extremely hard, you know, who are abusive and harsh and demanding and, you know, depressed or miserable all the time or telling me I'm a failure or whatever, right? How do I position internally with that? You know, do I become negative? You know, am I able to be positive? You know, what is my baseline? You know, can I use my abilities and my understanding to get into some kind of correct view of positioning to be engaged in bodhisattva virtuous behavior, right? Like if you're around a depressed person all day long, how do you not get sucked into depression, practically speaking, right? If you have somebody who's attacking you and criticizing you all day long, practically speaking, how do you not, you know, get really wounded and really hurt and really upset and really resentful and really angry? Well, it's correct. That's what we're talking about here in a tangible sense, right? And you work at your level of capacity, as Master Shantideva said. You start with carrots and potatoes. You start with the basics. Start at the level you're capable of working at. So early on in this, right when we were talking, you have to work at your own level. And my personal experience is somehow whenever I think I've reached a good level, it's like, oh, I got that down, I can handle that pretty well, and it just bumps up to another level. It's like, oh, I can handle a pretty good deal of, I can handle a pretty significant level of problem and negativity and difficulty and stress in my life and all the rest, whatever you want to call it. And then it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm cruising, I'm pretty comfortable with that. And it's like, oh, let's just bump it up to the next level, right? Let's heap on a heavier load and see how you do with that. Is there like a puppeteer up in the sky pulling the strings because I deserve it? No, it's that. You can think about it however you want to think about it. I don't know the answer because I can't see the stream of my karma, But the way I think about it, and the way I position with it is just building my capacity to be virtuous. I am learning to be virtuous. I am learning to be like a bodhisattva in more and more and more situations, right? It's one thing to say, yeah, I'm a good bodhisattva. I do well with bodhisattva activities, in Boulder, right? With half the people are stoned and everybody's polite, Then you move to New York City, and it's like, well, I'm not so good at my bodhisattva behavior in New York City, And then, you get pretty good with your bodhisattva behavior in New York City. Then, take it to the next level. And then, you read in the text, it's like, Rinpoche, so-and-so, Lama, whatever, walked out into the middle of the battlefield, and the armies, shooting thousands of arrows at each other, and he walked out in the middle, and, you don't go into that kind of heavy situation just randomly. You build capacity, right? This whole spiritual gig is this evolutionary path and process of evolving, building capacity, building virtuous capacity, building strength, on and on and on, right? Until you get to the point where it's like, oh, ask me to pluck up my eyeball. Not for me, but, people do it. Not a big deal for them.
So many lamas have come and said this is one of the best places to practice.
It's very hard.
Right.
It's very hard.
New York City?
Yeah, countless distractions. You have to have incredible motivation, incredible strength of will to meditate consistently and regularly, right? And to not get sucked into the countless distractions and diversions, which tell you that they're more important than your ethics and your spiritual evolution. It's endless, right? It's very hard in that regard. Yeah.
It's funny. It's like you take a skier to the top of a hill where there are a lot of what they call moguls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if it's a beginner, they're like, oh my God, it's going to be really hard, it's going to hurt. And it does.
Yeah.
You take an expert, they say, yeah, more moguls, we want more. You get the feeling like the further you evolve in your spiritual practice, the more you're going to be wanting to have challenging problems, which will give you an opportunity to practice.
Yeah, I like your metaphor, your analogy, in that it's like you can look at something that would be hard for others, and it's just no biggie. It's just kind of
when you're ready.
Just cruise through it.
Yeah.
You can go through that mogul field, that black diamond mogul field, like it's nothing, and it's like, wow, that was fun, or that was the rush, or
and
wow, that was a challenge.
If you're a really good skier, you'd want that instead of the easier thing. You'd want it so you could practice. Same with Buddhism. If we want to be able to, if we got really good.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody. I don't know that it's human nature. Lots of realms, but I don't know that it's ever human nature to search out problems and suffering. Unless you're like on a search and destroy mission for your negative karmas, and you're like the master of the, master karma ninja, warrior guy or princess or whatever.
Or to learn to practice mastering yourself, cherishing or mastering.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, when you're ready, you could say, this is something I'm going to work on, and I'm going to really work on it and focus on that and put myself in that situation. Sure, you can do that. Yeah. So, bottom line is this human realm is a broken realm. Nothing that we're going to externally fix is going to do it. Nothing that we are going to externally change or fix is going to bring us a consistent stream of happy thoughts. The only thing that's going to bring us a consistent stream of happy thoughts is the thing that causes the thoughts to pop into our head, which is our karma, our karmic seeds, our energetic impulses, which we're carrying around, right? It's the only thing, right? So, and why is it that I look at these shapes and colors? Why is it that I look at this raw data and these shapes and colors, and I see it as, you know, an arm, a human arm, right? It's because that's the only way my mind can function right now. That's all my mind can perceive right now. My mind is wired to only function and perceive that way. No matter how much I wish it were different, it doesn't work that way, right? It's just what it is. So, and when the karma to see this as an arm wears out, it'll be a dead arm, and I won't see it as my arm anymore. You know, I'll look down and I'll see a furry leg, or a paw, or a glowing crystal body. You know, whatever it might be, right? Whatever my mind is organizing. So that's the deal. All right, so a few things we should cover in terms of class content. So we're talking about the mind, right? The functioning of the mind. So we've been talking about the body and seeing the body a certain way, right? I can look at this and I can say this cylinder is this, or this is a glowing, you know, crystalline, you know, liquid crystal arm, or whatever it is, right? Or it's a fuzzy leg, you know, with long nails at the end. Whatever my mind is organizing is what it is for me. That's what makes me a human. The fact that my mind organizes the data to see this shape and this color and call it an arm is what makes me a human. When my mind functions to look at this data and see it as a furry thing with a paw at the end, that's what makes me a dog or an animal or whatever. And when my mind functions to perceive this data and this thing as a liquid crystalline glowing, you know, arm, that's what defines me as a holy being. So what we are and who we are is defined by how we perceive, you see, by the nature of our perception. Yeah.
So when you go home and you look at your child and you look at your child's arm and say, okay, I perceive a child's arm, that's what makes your child a child to you.
Yeah.
When your child looks at his or her arm and sees not a child's arm.
Yeah, I mean, talk to a teenager and they're like, I know more than you. I'm smarter than you.
Right.
I'm stronger than you.
Right.
I'm better than you.
Right.
I mean, you know, it's a completely different perception, right?
Right. Or your dog. You look at your dog's arm and your dog looks at his own leg or arm, perceives himself not as a dog at all. Quite often you see animals
Happy little beings running around
feeling
chasing
like
their
they're
tail.
humans, like they're interacting as
Yeah.
if they're, or vice versa. So
Yeah.
when it comes to our own perception of self, are you saying that we could perceive ourselves as a holy being?
That's the only way to perceive yourself as a holy being.
Especially when you're dying.
I mean,
Well, when we're dying.
no,
or
I
right
mean,
now.
like, if the so I ask you,
Huh.
if karmic seeds ripen in your mind stream in the next moments, right, such that your mind functioned differently, when your mind took in data through senses and processed and interpreted the data and projected the glowing being of light, would that be there for you? Yeah. Now, whether you're projecting that as a being floating around over here, whether you look down and project that, same point. Right? And that's the point of the meditation at the beginning of class. We have this self-identification that says, I can only be a human being. I can only exist in this way. I can't just be this joyous, happy, virtuous, uplifted being. That's not who I am. That's not what I am. That's not my nature. That's not my identity. Right? So we have this very, very limited self-identification as human beings, very narrow, constricted self-identification as human beings, where we deeply, deeply, deeply believe this is what we are, and this is all we are, and this is all we'll ever be. Right? So you have to break that down. You have to break through that to understand that my very existence as a human being could change at any moment.
It's dependent upon your own view, dependent upon your karmic growth.
When your perceptions fluctuate
and perception.
and you stop seeing yourself as a human being, you see yourself as dying, and you see yourself as then being another being. We should take a 2-minute break. I want to try to push through because we still have a lot to cover. Do you guys want to take a little break? What do you think? We just had a break. Does anybody, no, keep going, push
I'm
through?
gonna break. I got
Okay.
here a little late.
Okay.
Yeah, go.
All right, push through, good.
That's all.
Okay. So, talking about the mind, right? So when we talk about the functioning of the mind, all right? Does the mind work the same way as the pen? Does the mind exist from its own side?
Seems to.
Seems to. Does the mind have, is there a place where the mind resides? I mean, most of us think there's like this place right back here, which is really me, and it's a part of my mind, right?
Different than the brain.
Right. Does the mind exist from its own side? And if so, where does it reside? Right. The mind exists. We said the body, so, you know, I am made up of my body and mind, right? So we talked about the body, that's pretty straightforward. You know, there's a collection of parts, I exist in, you know, how I think of myself, how I name myself, in dependence upon all these parts that I'm overlaying an identity onto, right? I got arms and fingers and toes and legs and blood and all the rest, you know, mostly foreign matter. I call myself a human being in John, right? And that's me, I'm John, a human being, right? And I define it as body and mind, right? So we did the body, got that, so then get the mind, right? What about the mind? How, is the mind self-existent? Does it exist from its own side? Or is it also empty of self-existent nature? Where is the mind? Where's the mind's essence? Where does the mind reside? Where, is the mind empty of self-existent nature?
The mind is essentially karma unfolding.
That's one way to say it. That's one way to say it. If we're going to do the parts thing with the mind, what would be moments of awareness would be the parts of the mind. I have a moment of awareness in this moment, I have a moment of awareness in the next moment, I have a moment of awareness in the next moment. Pay attention to if you pay attention to your mind for a moment and the thoughts that are there, you know, we're essentially watching thoughts stream through our mind, right? Oh, it's a little dark in here, the fans are a little noisy, the heaters are heating the room pretty well, you know, my knees starting to bother me a little bit, I wish there were better snacks, you know, right?
But
That's
thoughts are not the mind necessarily.
That's what we call the mind, right?
Why do you say that? I mean, this, I think, therefore I am, or I think, therefore I think I am.
What would you call them?
Well, if you don't have a thought, do you have a mind? Like, what if you are perfectly in a meditation of emptiness of, like clarity of mind, and absolutely clear of all possible thoughts? Is it still a mind?
Well, from a Buddhist perspective, we say you have what's called main mind, which is sentience, which is defined as being aware and knowing.
Aware
So if
of
you are
mind.
sentient, then you have a mind. If you don't have awareness, if you don't have any awareness of anything, you're not sentient. So that's Buddhist
So
definition.
perhaps the
Luminous and
word is
aware is what you
awareness
said?
instead
Aware
of
and don't quote me on it, but
Yeah.
essentially aware and knowing.
Okay.
thought. Awareness, not thought, but awareness.
It's like
Aware.
a certain
Or
level of
knowing.
consciousness
Aware.
almost.
Yeah.
So, if we talk about the mind and how the mind exists, right? We'd say the mind exists in dependence upon parts. You could say the parts of the mind are this thought, the next thought. I mean, if I just had 5 thoughts in a row, the fan is turning, the lights are shining in my eyes, the heaters are humming, it's a little disturbing. Those are discrete thoughts, right? Or a stream of thoughts. When I think about my mind, what do I think about? I think about all the content of my mind, all the stuff that's in there, all the thoughts I've had, right? All the memories, I mean, what is a mind? A mind is all those thoughts, right?
The thoughts are not the mind.
Oh, what is the mind?
Okay, you're getting into the parts and the whole of the parts.
Is it
Yeah.
both your unconscious and your
The
conscious?
thinker of the thoughts, the perceiver of
Yeah.
perceiving.
Well, we'd say moments of consciousness, right? Let's put aside thoughts and let's just leave it at baseline moments of consciousness, being conscious moment to moment.
The reason we take away thought, because if you take out one thought, there's still other thoughts there. If you took away all the thoughts, you'd still have a mind because you have this awareness everyone else is talking
So let's
about.
not use
So
thoughts.
much.
Let's just use moments of consciousness. You're conscious, right? I mean, if you're conscious moment to moment, your mind is conscious and aware moment to moment, right? You can agree to that. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have moments of consciousness or moments of awareness, those moments, discrete moments,
Each 64th of a second when you're just thinking.
yeah, each moment of consciousness or each moment of awareness could be said to be the constituents of the mind, the parts of the mind.
A snapshot.
You can take a snapshot at any point in time. Moments of feelings. You can define it however you want. The point is that the mind, what we call the mind, is made up of something. It's got something in there. There's something going on, right?
I mean, if the mind is an infinite, like, you know, you can have New York City in your mind, you can have an entire universe in your mind. Your mind is infinite.
Mhm.
It's not about the moment, it's about some sort of like expanded space that has the capacity of having
But if we talk about
concept or
what
self-awareness or moment of
if we talk
awareness.
if we talk about what is the mind,
Is it
where
the
is the
vessel or is
mind?
it the contents of the vessel? I guess what I'm getting at.
Well, if there's
The
a
mind.
vessel, so again, the same thing. If there's a vessel, where does it reside? If there's a
Because it's
vessel,
not
what
in
is
the
it?
body. It's
In-
not in the body. It's like the
so-
software versus the hardware.
So is it
It's like-
floating around us? Is it inside the body? Is it outside the body? Is it half inside and half outside? Part inside and part outside? So what is it comprised of? How does it exist? I mean, from a Buddhist perspective, we can't just say, I don't know. We have to analyze it. Right?
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Well, if you say the mind doesn't exist, then what are you thinking with?
Right.
You can't just
The
say, I don't
same
know.
way that the body doesn't exist. You know, it's
Right.
not the.
Well, you gotta be careful now. You can't just say the body doesn't exist. The
No,
body
okay, the
does
body
exist in a
exists.
certain way, just as the mind does exist in a certain way. I mean, you're there, you have a body. It exists in dependence upon.
Your mind, but your mind exists independent from your mind.
So, we gotta get to it in that respect, right? What does the mind exist in dependence upon? Moments of consciousness, moments of awareness,
Awareness.
right? Right? So, we're forced to see the mind in a certain way. We're forced to overlay the idea of mind upon moments of consciousness or moments of awareness, or a collection of feelings, or a collection of thoughts, or a collection of memories. Right? So we define the mind. It's just like the parts of a body or the parts of a pen. It's exactly the same thing. You know, there's a bunch of parts, and I overlay a name, a term, and an idea onto those things. Exact same thing. But the mind is exactly the same as the pen and the body in terms of how it exists and what it exists in dependence upon. My mind exists in dependence upon me saying, my mind is all these thoughts going on in here. My mind is all these moments of consciousness. My mind is a collection of all my feelings. You can call it whatever you want. You define it whatever way you want. But it exists in dependence on something, right?
Yeah.
So, dependent origination in the highest school of Buddhism means that our parts appear to you, and your karma appears to you. Right? It makes you see it in a certain way. Nothing exists any other way.
Dependent origination means it appears to you. Whatever it is, your karma, your mind,
The raw data appears to you,
the raw data.
or the parts appear to you, right? In the way that your karma forces you to see it. And they don't exist in any other way. Everything exists to you in the way that your karma forces you to see it. It doesn't exist in any other way. That's emptiness. Nothing exists in any other way except the way in which your karma forces you to see it. What's your karma? Your mind. What's your mind? An idea. Right? There's not anything physical or mental or emotional or anything about the world which isn't created by karma forcing us to see the data in a certain way. There's nothing anywhere that exists outside of our karma forcing us to see it that way. Independent of our karma forcing us to see it that way. Everything exists in dependence upon our karma forcing us to see it that way. Nothing is not that way. That's emptiness. Right? So, another way to think about the mind is there's a thing to be named. There are bits there, there's data there are parts there, and those are the thing to be named. There's a substrate, there's a basis, there's something there, and that is the thing to be named, the thing to be conceived of, right? Right? We can call it the mind, and therefore you have a mind. So that's the key to being happy, right? That's it. So fix the karma, plant the correct karmic seeds, have the correct energetic impulses and latencies, right? To have a continuous stream of happy, blissful thoughts. And that is the secret to being happy all the time and to reaching tantric paradise and becoming enlightened. That's how you look down and you see, Chakrasamvara, Vajradini, Avalokiteshvara, Tara's body. You look down and you see it because your mind is forcing you to see it that way. What does it mean to say your mind is forcing you to see it that way? It's a little bit unwieldy to me when I say it like that. My mind can only function to perceive the data in a certain way. Right now, our minds, ordinary human beings, if you are ordinary human beings, our minds can only function to perceive 1% of the visible and audible spectrum. It can only function that way and no other way, period. Okay? Fact. Okay. If my mind could only function to perceive glowing light, radiance, liquid crystal form, which experiences everything as total pure bliss, that's my reality. How is that any more unusual than the mind we have right now? It's not, conceptually, right? Broadly speaking, it's like we have this prejudice, it's like we have this bias that things have to be this way, and this is the only thing there is, this human existence, and this daily life we experience, and this realm that we go through moment to moment, day to day, it's ups and downs, and everything giving us problems, and nothing working quite right, and, having to change all the time because there's always some dissatisfaction. It's like that way of being, somehow we believe that's it. And it's not possible that it can be any other way, and it's a very deeply ingrained belief, right? But if we really take a step back for a moment, and we say, look, science is telling me, and I get it, it's verified, I have a very limited organism in my body and mind that can only perceive a very infinitesimal part of the scientifically observed world. Okay, makes absolute complete congruent sense that I could have faculties which could perceive the other 98%, or something even off the scientific spectrum, the scale of current measurement, right? Every 100 years there's a new scale of scientific measurement capacity, right, which leapfrogs the last century, right? Maybe I could have perceptual ability which is consistent with what science will measure 500 years from now. But I could perceive it just because I have better faculties and better mind, right? Why can't that be the case? That's the whole point of getting enlightened. That's the whole point of Tantra. That's the whole point of understanding karma and ethics and emptiness. It's just that simple. Buddhism says, configure your mind like this, and you will have these perceptions. That's all. If you want to get rid of suffering perceptions, if you want to get rid of suffering people, if you want to get rid of suffering reality, configure your mind so that, first of all, you don't see the data organized that way, and whatever way you organize the data, it never causes you an emotional or mental problem. Right? Configure your mind in a way where it can only perceive data as a wonderful thing, where it can only arise as the most pleasant, enjoyable, blissful thing. Right? And every thought and emotion you have, and sensory input you have, is completely blissful. That is what a holy being experiences. If the Dalai Lama sees himself as a holy being from his side, as a highly evolved, spiritual, enlightened being from his side, if he sees himself that way, it doesn't matter what he eats or drinks. It's the exact same high bliss. You see? Because once you reach highest bliss, you can't get any higher. And if a holy being has reached highest bliss, every single sensory input is the exact same equivalent highest bliss. Doesn't matter if somebody's yelling at you, or singing you a beautiful song, or giving you the food you like, or the food has got garlic in it, or chili peppers, or whatever. It's the exact same experience of highest bliss. That's all their mind can function to perceive. So Buddhism says there are beings who have that capacity here and now. And, there are thousands upon thousands of beings who have achieved enlightenment who exist in that state. And we're the leftovers. And we can do it, and we need to do it, and this is how you do it. It's just reminding yourself, I have to change the very nature of my mind, my subtle, energetic system in mind, so that its very nature is to function in a way where it only perceives good things. Only good things can appear in my reality. Only good things can actually manifest and exist in my reality. There isn't even a word for suffering. There isn't even a word for pain. There isn't a word for unhappy. It doesn't exist. It's a different reality. That's where I want to be. That's the kind of life that I want to have. So that's what we're doing here. Okay. So how do we do it, right? I mean, we engage in the 6 perfections, right? If you engage in giving, if I go out and I give someone a snack, and say, that's ordinary giving. If I do it with understanding of emptiness, if I understand I'm giving this person a snack, they're an empty object, this food I'm considering tasty or something they'll enjoy, I'm going to see them smile when they get it. I get how karma works. By giving them this food, I'm collecting the karma and configuring my mind to perceive a world of food abundance in the future. That's the perfection of giving. It's giving with wisdom. It's giving with understanding karma and emptiness, right? That's how you engage in the perfection of giving. It's not because you gave $100 instead of $1. It's giving whatever you can and whatever is appropriate and whatever is comfortable and reasonable with correct view, understanding karma and emptiness. That's the perfection of giving. Now, how do I get to paradise based upon that? I mean, if paradise means everyone in my world is perfect. I mean, I just gave one person one cookie. How is that going to equate to, countless beings giving me everything I want? There's no equivalency there, right? That's where dedication comes in, and that's where intention comes in. When you give someone a cookie with the perfection of giving, and you have the motivation or the aspiration or the dedication to say, I'm doing this to end all being suffering. I'm doing this so that every living being has their every need met. You have just collected the karma relative to every living being. You see? So ordinary giving, ordinary virtue is not enough to create paradise. It has to extend to every living being. You see? You have to collect the karma relative to every living being. Right? So there's the scope. And then this is a self-perpetuating process, right? It's not like I get to paradise and then I can be a schmuck, and stop treating people well, right? It's understanding karma and emptiness to say, I have to always be treating people well, I have to always be giving, because it's a self-perpetuating cycle, right? Every time I give, every time I treat someone else beautifully, the universe treats me beautifully. My reality, my mind is beautiful, right? I can never stop. But you get to a point where that's all you do, and then you're just in this loop, this enlightened loop, right? Where you're always doing the virtuous right thing. I mean, the challenge is getting there, all right? And that's the hard part, right? So consistency is really important, obviously. I mean, even now in our practice, especially now in our practice.
Are there traps in respect to intention versus falling into natural thinking?
What do you mean traps?
Traps like, I understand that the path to enlightenment in this lifetime is through the actions of karma and the intention attached to that said karma.
So in the sense that you can't have your cake and eat it too,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And that's a Christian guilt thing, It's a sense of, it's not okay for me to look out for myself
But
and
also-
help other people.
But, I mean, is it magical thinking to a certain degree where you're like, okay, I'm going to attach a lot of attention to this act of positive karma? Are there any traps in that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get it. Is it a magical trap to thinking?
No. Are there any traps in regards to, I mean, what are the rules of the road in regard to intention when performing acts of positive karma?
Well, I mean, it's either I'm doing it for myself or I'm doing it for me and other people, right?
Okay.
And there's two divisions of Buddhism. There's two ways of defining Buddhist motivation. I mean, Hinayana motivation, which is still a very high motivation, is I'm doing this for myself. I want to end all my afflictions and I want to attain nirvana, and that's got to do the emptiness and karma and ethics thing. That's nirvana. That's lots of Buddhists.
Right.
So, and then the other is I'm going to do the bodhisattva path. I'm going to do the 6 perfections, and I'm going to aspire to end all suffering for all living beings everywhere. So, the one is nirvana alone versus enlightened paradise
Right.
with all beings.
Right.
So it's different cause, you see, it's different causation for a different result. So as a Hinayana practitioner, one could practice with karma and emptiness ethics and attain their personal nirvana. Yeah?
So Theravada is Hinayana, right?
Yeah.
I heard some stat that like Myanmar is like the most giving country in the world. I don't know where that comes from, but I was trying to connect the dots. Like, wait a minute, so it's Theravada, it's Hinayana. Like, how could that be? And do you have any?
In Myanmar?
Yes.
Well, I don't know about Myanmar per se, but culturally, things become established. It becomes a cultural habit to give. I mean, look at Tibet. Everyone supported monasteries through giving, right? I mean, we don't do it in this country. It's not culturally extant. So, I mean, I can imagine a case where you have a country where everyone's culturally inculcated to say, everybody should, feed the monks, or everyone should give, 10% of their whatever they have to their neighbors. I don't.
Like we give out Halloween candy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a habit, right? Yeah.
I think we give a little more than a whole week.
But I mean, I just think I don't know what to say about it other than it's a habit that's established. So, in this path and this practice, it's like going to the gym or going to a yoga class or doing meditation. At first, it's really hard. At first, it's a lot of struggle. It's hard to go to the gym. It's hard to sit down and meditate. It's hard to do yoga. It's not pleasant. It's not easy, right? It's a lot of effort, a lot of difficulty, and then the consistency brings comfort and familiarity and ease of practice. And so this karma and emptiness and ethics thing, it's exactly the same way. It requires consistency of practice, and the more consistently you practice, the better you get at it. And it brings its results, and it becomes easier, and then you start to have a better quality of life. And quality of life is indicative of how well one's practicing. For me, so I'm running out of time. So, on the higher stages of the path, it's called the blissful path to bliss. The more you practice and the better you practice, the happier you are and the better you feel. It's like you go to a good yoga class, right? You feel good coming out of a good yoga class. You have a nice meditation session. You feel good coming out of a nice meditation session, right? You treat people well. You feel good treating people well. I mean, you just do. It's personal experience, validated, right? We just don't do it, I mean, it's really that simple. It's not like there's any ambiguity or disagreement about the fact that it feels good to do these things in the short term, and you can argue that it brings long-term karmic results or not, but you certainly can't argue that even in the observable short term that it's nice, So even if only that is true, why not do it? Even if there is no long-term karmic consequence, we confirm that meditating feels good, after you get past the initial learning curve, and yoga feels good after you get past the initial learning curve, and being nice to other people feels good. Why wouldn't you do it? Right? Take a shot on the long-term benefits, right? Blissful path to bliss. Right. Everything gets increasingly blissful. unfortunately, we can talk about this for 2 hours, and then we walk out the door and we've forgotten about it in 30 seconds, right? And that's the unfortunate part of all this, is like it's very profound and it's very, very holy and essential, right, to end our suffering and to our enlightenment. And our heads are like wood. It sinks in very slowly, right? And it takes a lot of repetition. But that's okay. And that's why we have to hear this stuff over and over and over again. That's why you have to, especially with emptiness, you have to just have many, many hours of exposure. Year after year of exposure and study and practice and thinking, right? Hundreds of times, and then it goes deeper. It goes a little deeper each time, right? So it's the whole process of spiritual realizations, right? Which requires study and effort at the beginning, and there's no escape. There's no getting out of it. I mean, there's no magic pill. There's no magical thinking, fantasy outcome which says I don't have to work and I don't have to make effort to evolve spiritually. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of study. It's a lot of paying attention and practice. And after you get up to speed and past your learning curve, and you have consistency, it feels really nice. Both in the immediate short term and in the long term benefits that it brings. So let's do it. Next week we'll talk about logic.
Really.
Not listening to.
Sashi Buki Chumchen Reto Rira Vinci Ninde Kempadi Sangye Shindu Ite Wadi Joku Nanda Shingwa Drupasho Idam Guru Ramanda Takandir Tatyami Gewadi Dewope Sunam Yeshe Sosoche Sunam Yeshe Sujumwe Tampa Kuni Drupasho.
Once again, bring your awareness to the feeling of holiness inside your heart. The holy being has joined you there, glowing, radiating beautiful light, or to your own inner feeling of purity and love and joy and virtue and uplifted energy. Feel that very strongly. Think of yourself as a different being. Think of yourself as a completely different class of being, a different kind of being. Feel that you are a being who's always happy and always joyous and always loving. Try to feel it right now, in this moment. Strongly identify that this is me, this is who I am, and this is my nature. By the power of these teachings, by the power of this holy lineage, by the power of the truth of dependent origination, which can never fail, may we quickly come to directly experience ultimate reality and put an end to every suffering, every realm, every being. Thank you.
Thank you.